Sports betting odds for who is going to win the national championship in the 2023 college football season have been out since the day after Georgia massacred TCU to conclude the 2022 college football season. Odds have been out since day one of the 2023 preseason, and Fanduel Sportsbook just updated their odds, which have Georgia favored at plus 220 to win it all in the 2023 season. Alabama follows them at plus 500. Ohio State and Michigan are the third and fourth most favored to win at plus 700 and plus 1,000 respectively. I find a lot of value in the Ohio State and Michigan selections, more than I do the Alabama selection, and certainly more than I do the Georgia selection. Georgia is heavily favored, and you're not going to win a whole lot of money betting on Georgia to win it all. I think Ohio State and Michigan are also considerably better than Alabama by, in fact, a pretty sizable, if not wide margin, and I do think both will be better than Georgia as well, but by a much smaller margin in the 2023 season. But we're not even going to be talking about those teams, nor are we going to be talking about USC, Florida State, or LSU, who sit at plus 1,600 and plus 1,800 for Florida State and LSU, respectively. I'm only going to be talking about teams that are plus 2,000, plus 3,000, and beyond that. And there are some extremely valuable picks for teams that could reasonably win the national title. And there are also two teams that I think it's a long shot, but they have the talent, they have the blue chip ratio, and I can see it happening. There are two teams that I think have a reasonable chance. They have a sizable chunk. I can see them doing this in multiple simulations. If college football was to be simulated 1,000 times, I could see these teams winning it all more than once. The other teams would probably win it once or twice, maybe 3 times the other two teams would, but I can see it happening, especially with the rule of the blue chip ratio, which is essentially a must to win the college football playoff. It is a must to win the national title in the modern era of college football. Before we get into what these picks are, to which teams we are going to be talking about, I would encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe to this channel so we can get to 9,000 subscribers. At 10,000 subscribers, I will be doing a giveaway. My live videos are going to be posted soon. This month, I am going to work on my green screen, hopefully getting live videos out toward the end of the month or the beginning of May. So hit the notification bell so you can stay tuned for that. And comment who you think the 4 most valuable picks to win the college football playoff are down below. Without further ado, let's get right into it. We're starting off with the two teams who they can win it, but it will be very difficult. These are the teams that very slim chances. They have extremely slim chances to win it all. These are the plus 3,000s. These are the plus 3,000s that we are going to be talking about. First and foremost, I want to talk about Oregon. Oregon has been recruiting at an elite level. They signed the number 9 overall recruiting class in the 2023 cycle with a 90.89 average rank. So on average, they signed a mid-tier 4-star recruit. You need to sign on average at least a low-tier 4-star recruit to have the capability to win the national title. If you just sign 3-star recruits and you're great at developing players, well, you might be able to win a playoff game like TCU or reach the college football playoff like Cincinnati in 2021, Michigan State in 2015, etc. But you're not going to win the national title. Oregon is one of these few teams that fits the blue chip ratio, that has a great staff, that is well balanced, that uses the transfer portal, and that has great players. Oregon is also number 6 in the Pac-12 in returning production. They're 54th nationally. Not a strong number. I will mind you that. There are many Power 5 programs with bigger numbers, Boston College is an example of this. But Boston College isn't going to win the national title. They don't recruit well enough. There's been no indication of success. And it's not like TCU, where they had very high returning production and high talent and high development. They were just horrendously misused by Gary Patterson. Sonny Dykes, an underrated head coach, comes in with one of the best offensive minds in the nation and revamps that team. And they're clutch, and they win a bunch of close games. It's not going to happen at a place like Boston College. It's just not going to. Oregon is lower in returning production, but higher in talent. And these things kind of balance each other out, I guess you could say. They really do. They have Bo Nix, who had a QBR of 85.1 in 2022, which was 8th in the nation. He will return as a Heisman contender at quarterback. Bo Nix had a reputation at Auburn for being a below-average player despite being recruited as a 5-star. He is living out his legacy as a 5-star, living up to the hype right now in Oregon. And you got to admit that the Pac-12 doesn't play the same defense that the SEC does, but also Oregon's offensive line is much better than Auburn's offensive line. Much better than an offensive line at Auburn than anything Gus Malzahn or Brian Harsin had. Oregon develops and nurtures like Michigan. They take 3- and 4-star players and transform them into studs. And at the same time, they also recruit like Georgia at offensive line as well. And Bo Nix returns, I think, 2 or 3 starting offensive linemen. They add Johnny Cornelius from the transfer portal, one of the highest-ranked offensive line transfers, and another offensive lineman transfer from Texas. And Texas returns all 5 of their offensive linemen. So they're getting a very solid backup, a player who could probably start at almost any other team. Just there isn't any room at Texas, wants to be guaranteed starting time. So Oregon's offensive line is just getting reinforced year after year after year. Top wide receiver Troy Franklin and Bucky Irving at running back also return, and that with Bo Nix is one of the nation's best offensive trios. And Dan Lanning, looking at all of these things, it's especially the truth on offense. They have the pieces to make a run for the national championship in year 2. Their defense has a lot of question marks behind it, but Dan Lanning's a defensive guy. Mario Cristobal's defense in 2020 and in 2021 wasn't exactly its strength whatsoever. They're bringing in transfers too. Dan Lanning is in Oregon. They are bringing in Jordan Birch, a 5-star edge player from South Carolina, and they're also bringing in Justin Jacobs. Jacobs played plenty at Iowa at linebacker under Phil Parker and under a defense that was top 5 2 years in a row, probably top 2 or maybe even top 1 in many categories 2 years in a row in 2021 and 2022. So Oregon, certainly a contender. Texas, now here you might be laughing at me, and it's okay that you are, but Texas has recruited at a better level than they ever have unless you look at the Mac Brown era historically. Steve Sarkisian and Gary Patterson have also, whether as a coordinator in Sarkisian or a head coach in Gary Patterson, they have assisted teams to reach an undefeated record. Sarkisian did it at Alabama in 2020 as their offensive coordinator. Gary Patterson did it in 2010 as TCU's head coach. Texas has a staff that is familiar with winning. Their defensive coordinator, Pete Kwiatkowski, commanded defenses at Boise State and Washington for teams that won New Year's Six Bowls, for some Boise State teams that were close to undefeated or went undefeated, and for a Washington team that reached the college football playoff. He was on that staff, I do believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Texas has a staff that knows how to win. And this didn't click in my mind until a few days ago, but I'm thinking, wait a second. They're plus 3,000. They're number 1 in the Big 12 in returning production. They're top 20 nationally. They might be top 10 if you only look at Power 5 teams. They return their entire offensive line, which is great because they lose both of their best running backs, and the offensive line will help new running backs run the football effectively. We all know that if you have great running backs but a terrible offensive line, your run game is still going to be inconsistent. If the inverse is true, your run game may not be as explosive, but you will have some consistency as there is good blocking. Oh, and the Longhorns also signed the number 3 overall recruiting class, including transfers. On average, they have a mid to upper mid-tier 4-star recruit, which is very impressive. Number 1 in their conference in returning production. The Big 12, by the way, is weak, whether it's my potential power index, which I am working through to the best of my ability to make sure that it just best serves my intended purposes. It's my own power ranking system. Whether it's that, and my PPI has Texas ranked as the highest team in the Big 12 by a mile, or whether it's Bill Connolly and returning production, whether it's probably the preseason polls. I almost know for a fact ESPN's FPI is going to have Texas as the highest ranked Big 12 team. All the signs are pointing to Texas having a huge year, big time year. And they're plus 3,000. They're sitting there at plus 3,000. And Oregon is a team where I have a very tough time seeing Oregon win a national title, but they've contended at that level. They have a coach in Dan Lanning who, like Steve Sarkisian, he's been a coordinator at a team that knows how to build a winning culture and that has gone undefeated. So they have winners there on staff and winners just at multiple places in Oregon staff, but especially the case with Texas. And I look at that. I look at the fact that the Big 12 is weak. I look at the fact they're plus 3,000. I think they have better odds than Oregon does, in my opinion. I could see Texas winning the national title multiple times if we were to simulate the season 1,000 times. Now, would they be winning it 100 times? Like 1 out of every 10 seasons? No, of course not. But maybe 10 times, around there, which is still, considering that college football is extremely top-heavy, it's still pretty good. I really like Texas. The schedule outside of a road game at Bama aligns with them well, and no one's going to punish you for that loss because it's an early loss against a team that will likely, despite the fact that there is reason to have them outside of the top 4, I doubt they're going to fall anywhere outside of the top 4 or top 5 in the AP or preseason coaches poll. That would be a top 5 loss. No shame in that, especially because it's in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Moving on, the Longhorns return Quinn Ewers, who had some inconsistencies last year due to injury, and they add 2023 5-star quarterback Arch Manning. They are competing right now. I do think Ewers will win the starting job, but having that competitive spirit, that's only going to build both of them up, in my opinion. It might be a different story when there's only one good quarterback in your room and you just want to guarantee his position as the starter. But when you have 2 highly competitive guys, like if J.J. McCarthy and Jaden Davis were in the same QB room right now, saying as a Michigan fan, I'd want them to compete. Competition makes things better. Not overly aggressive competition, which could lead to injuries, but competition and learning from your teammate, which in practice, if it's at the same position as your respected opponent. Also, Texas, outside of Ohio State, has the most loaded wide receiver room in college football. I think Washington could contend with that. They're a top 3 wide receiver room, but I would say strictly it's Ohio State 1, Texas 2, Washington 3. Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, and Jordan Whittington, no secondary will be able to cover that for an entire game. It will not be possible. And the defense, which by the way last year was much upgraded compared to the 2021 unit, returns 74% of its production. And champions have both offense and defense in play, and in good play. I want to add that part. Now we're talking about the plus 2,000 teams. These are the teams that I could see winning the national title more than the plus 3,000 teams, in my opinion. I could see these teams, I think both, mostly for Clemson, it's not due to a talent standpoint. It's not due to a developmental standpoint. It's due to the fact that Dabo Swinney has done this 2 times before. I, nor my power ranking, nor a lot of people like Clemson to do much of anything in 2023. They signed the number 15 recruiting class, 90.49 overall rank, which is actually the lowest, I think, the lowest amongst all of these teams, all 4 of these teams. And they're number 6 in the ACC in returning production, 36th nationally. Most of my liking for Clemson and why I think this could be valuable is A, they play in the ACC, which is a ridiculously weak schedule. And unlike Florida State, who faces LSU in a neutral site, they don't face anyone of notoriety in the non-conference. And if you say that Notre Dame and South Carolina are, no. South Carolina's outside the top 100 in returning production. I don't think with Garrett Riley as OC, they'll lose to South Carolina again. Now, maybe they will, but we will have to see, though that game, since it's on the road, should be one to circle, but I don't think they'll lose to South Carolina. Notre Dame, that Sam Hartman has not beaten Clemson, and Notre Dame's traveling to Death Valley. Their schedule aligns perfectly for them. And even if they lose one regular season game, they have the name brand. Clemson is treated like a blue blood. They have the name brand. It's why they were ranked in the top 4 of the college football playoff when everyone knew they were not a top 6 football team. Everyone. It's mainly because of the staff. Dabo Swinney, he's done this 2 times before. If they've done it 2 times before, one of their teams barely met the blue chip ratio, and the blue chip ratio means you got to have more 4 and 5 stars than 3 stars. Only 52% of one of his teams, I think it was the 2016 team, maybe it was the 15 team who didn't win the national title, but they almost did, and they were the 1 seed. The 2015 or 16 team only had 52% of its roster as 4 or 5 stars. Only. And he won a national title. I'm pretty sure it was the 2016 team. And he won the national title with that low of a blue chip ratio. If he can do that with that roster, now granted he had Deshaun Watson as quarterback, but Garrett Riley can totally develop Cade Klubnik into a great quarterback, then he can totally win his 3rd national title. Will Shipley also returns, a 1,000-yard running back who also ran for 15 rushing touchdowns. Clemson's defense also returns most of their players, though they do lose a lot of key NFL guys, and they return all of their defensive backs. All of them. And their defensive staff, which I thought was pretty mediocre last year, they have staff continuity there. Maybe they'll learn from some of their mistakes. I don't necessarily know. All I do know is I think that out of all the teams that I've talked about, outside of maybe Oregon, there could be some debate there, Clemson might have the worst roster amongst these 4. And we'll get to the 4th and final team in just around a minute. But they do probably have the best coach. At least when you look if you look at a standpoint from past success, they have the best coach by a mile. No other head coach, has won a national title in this group as a head coach. As a coordinator, Steve Sarkisian has, and Dan Lanning have, but not as head coaches. Dabo Swinney has won 2 national titles in the college football playoff era, and he has a .500 record against Nick Saban as a head coach, which not even Kirby Smart has. And Kirby Smart, by some, currently is considered to be the number 1 head coach in college football. So Clemson, I think at plus 2,000 are pretty valuable, pretty underrated pick. Even though I myself don't even have them in my top 10, I could totally see them being a top 10 or top 4 team. It might be ugly. They might look ugly at times, but we've seen some of Dabo's teams look ugly before, and then once that postseason hits, they are a nuclear bomb just waiting to go off. And speaking of a nuclear bomb, talk about Penn State's running back room. Penn State at plus 2,000, I think, does have some value. Penn State is a team that I look at their schedule, and it's similar to Oregon's schedule. It's very tough. Texas and Clemson do have somewhat of an easy road in their respective conferences. Meanwhile, the Pac-12 and Big Ten are relatively deep. I'd say the Pac-12 is deeper than the Big Ten. The problem is Penn State plays in the Big Ten East. They have to travel to Ohio State and host Michigan. And unlike Ohio State or Michigan, who I think have the talent, coaching staff, development, and trench play to go 12-0, I don't think Penn State is capable at going anything better than 11-1. But due to Big Ten tie-breaking rules, if the West Division opponents that Penn State faces, and this is in the tie-breaking rules of the Big Ten, if a three-way tie occurs, one of the tiebreakers is the combined record of the Big Ten West opponents. If Penn State gets that at 11-1 in a three-game tiebreaker in which Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State beat each other in a round-robin way, let's say Ohio State beats Penn State beats Michigan, Michigan beats Ohio State. It's the best and most likely example of this. If Penn State's West Division opponents have the best record compared to Ohio State or Michigan's West Division opponents, they get to go to Indy. And they get to go possibly, and most likely, win the Big Ten championship. And if they're 12-1, they'll go to the college football playoff. And if they're 11-1, there's a possibility that an 11-1 Penn State, like Ohio State last year at 11-1, could make the college football playoff without going to Indy. Let's say that Ohio State's 10-2, Penn State's 11-1, and Michigan's 12-0, and Penn State's only losses to Michigan. An 11-1 Penn State losing to an undefeated 13-0 Michigan, who'd be top 2 ranked in the country, could totally get a college football playoff bid. That would not surprise me at all. Despite the fact that their schedule doesn't align with their prospective success, Penn State can do this. They've been recruiting very well, top 10 or top 15 over the past 2 or 3 recruiting classes, an average rank of 90.6. They're number 8 in the Big Ten in returning production, 56 nationally, which is a little low, but a lot of that is Sean Clifford leaving, and there is an argument that quarterback Drew Aller could be a huge upgrade just in his first year of starting as compared to Sean Clifford. If you don't think that's possible, just look at J.J. McCarthy replacing Cade McNamara, or even Dwayne Haskins replacing longtime starter at Ohio State J.T. Barrett. You can have first-year starting QBs who are massive upgrades to well-tenured veterans. And speaking of first-time replacements who replaced veterans, last year Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton gave Penn State its best run game since maybe Journey Brown in late 2019. But if you're talking about consistency, you'd have to go back to either Miles Sanders in 2018 or Saquon Barkley in 2017 and 16. Penn State will have a top 3 running back rotation nationally. I would place them behind Michigan for sure, potentially Alabama if their running backs can really really play at a high level, really live up to their high ceiling potential. And if Ohio State can live up to having a healthy running back room, I'd say Ohio State very well could potentially be better than Penn State at that position as well. But there are very few teams who could have a better run game if you're only looking at running backs from Penn State's perspective. And even though I do not think this offensive line will be a world beater, James Franklin should have his strongest O-line group of his entire Penn State career. They return everyone on the O-line but center Juice Scruggs. They also replace their losses at wide receiver with portal additions, most notably Dante Cephas. This could be the Nittany Lions' first college football playoff appearance, potentially first college football playoff national title. If Penn State can go on the road and beat Ohio State, or if they can host Michigan and beat them soundly in Beaver Stadium, I think Ohio State and Michigan are the two best teams in the nation this year. If they can beat one of those in the regular season, who's to say that they can't beat other teams who I think will be worse than those two in the college football playoff? or potentially in a rematch with one of those two. So Penn State, just like Clemson, Texas, Oregon, each have their reasons to win the national title and certainly to reach the college football playoff. If you didn't notice, all of these teams fulfill the blue chip ratio, which I think is a necessity or close to a necessity to win the college football playoff. All teams also have solid trench play, or at least they should, whether it's based on recruiting, returning production, all of that stuff. They look like they're going to have solid trench play, especially on the offensive line. Their defenses are anywhere from below average to one of the best in the nation. There's no team in this grouping that doesn't fulfill the blue chip ratio, 1, and 2, has any part of the field that is atrocious in any way, shape, or form, whether by projections or returning production. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, again, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment your thoughts down below. I will see you guys later, and I will be engaging in the comment section.